Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Today is Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. As the New York legislature works in its final week, the New York Senate passes the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of New York. We'll talk to the Deputy Political Director of Stand Up America to determine the likelihood of the bill getting passed and signed by the governor before the session ends tomorrow. Folks, in Kentucky, Charles Booker wants to unseat Senator Rand Paul, and he drops a major commercial out of the gate that calls out Paul for standing in the way of an anti-lynching bill. Wait until you see this promo. Also, more funerals in Texas today. In Uvalde, Texas, a teacher, her husband, as well as her husband, who died of a heart attack, as well as a student, were remembered by loved ones. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott wants lawmakers to create committees to develop school safety proposals to prevent another mass shooting. So why isn't he calling special sessions like he did to advance voter suppression? A black man spent 23 years in prison for a murder he did not commit, and now New York City will pay him $7 million. He was there when the Russian invasion began in Ukraine. I'll talk with independent journalist Terrell Starr about what is happening in Ukraine and what is next for that country. Also, folks continue to advocate for Brittany Griner. The WNBA star is still being held in Russia. In our Tech Talk segment, a free app designed to help you budget better and build your credit is being backed financially by Jay-Z. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
You would think New York State would have some of the more better laws when it comes to voting, when in fact it is one of the worst states when it comes to keeping people from voting. That's right. New York State, blue New York State. Well, in the New York Senate, they have passed a bill named after the late Congressman John Lewis to deal with these issues, to expand access to the polls, as well as deal with the reality of voter suppression in that state. Yes, I'm calling it voter suppression. The problem now, though, is will the New York House get to this particular bill before the session ends tomorrow? We're going to talk about a variety of things that are in this bill with my next guest who joins us now. They have been very much in front of advocating for this issue. Reggie Thetford, Deputy Political Director with Stand Up America. Reggie, glad to have you on Roland Unfiltered. So let's walk through this, because a lot of people really don't understand the problems in New York State when it comes to voting. This is what the bill addresses. Let's go ahead and pull it up, please. Come on, guys, let's pull it up, please. Thank you. All right, launching a pre-clearance program that requires local governments with records of discrimination, providing new legal tools to fight discriminatory voting provisions in court, expanding language assistance for voters with limited English proficiency, creating strong protections against voter intimidation, deception, or obstruction, instructing state judges to interpret election laws in a pro-voter way whenever possible so that close questions of legal interpretation are resolved in favor of the rights of qualified voters, and establishing a central hub for election data and demographic information. Reggie, walk people through to explain how, frankly, awful New York State has been when it comes to voting.
Well, first, Roland, thank you for having me. It's a privilege and an honor to be on today's show. As you mentioned, New York, the Senate, they just passed the NYVRA. And as you can see across the nation, you alluded to in your opening, we're seeing states pass bill after bill to suppress the vote. And so right now we're seeing New York take a stand and go in the opposite direction to pass legislation that would eliminate, mitigate, some of the discriminatory practices that we continue to see that undermine voters of New York, especially voters of color. So from long lines to inconvenient polling locations, and failure to provide language assistance. As it was pulled up, the VRA hopes to address many of these. But one of the... Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of the most important pieces of this piece of legislation that is modeled after the federal VRA is the pre-clearance program. And this is what gives the piece of legislation teeth. It's a program that requires local governments to record or that have records of discrimination to prove that proposed voting changes will not harm voters of color before they go into effect. And this is a very important piece because, as you mentioned, you would think a state like New York might not need something like this. But for those that know the Shelby v. Holder case that was gutted in 2013, New York actually had jurisdictions that were covered under the DOJ. And so, although New York is perceived to be a very blue, progressive state, there are certain things that need to be addressed. And unfortunately, our U.S. Senate failed to pass this at the federal level. And so, thank you to Senator Zellner Myrie and Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, who are leading this effort at the state level here in New York.
And not only that, ballot access. I mean, people who were ballots being kicked out. I mean, it was just all sort of back and forth that a lot of people, again, didn't really understand. You would think that, what's happening in Alabama and Mississippi? But groups like Black Voters Matter, they held protests in New York State to say, hey, Democrats, change these dadgum laws.
Yes. And we're seeing New York take the steps in the right direction. As we mentioned, the New York Senate has passed the NYVRA, but also both chambers, the House and the Senate, have passed what we're calling the Wrong Church Bill. And historically, enforcement of this Wrong Church rule, it discounts any otherwise eligible voters' ballot if they vote, unfortunately, at the wrong polling place. And this disproportionately disenfranchises Black and brown voters. So just last year, 2020, there were nearly 14,000 votes that were disqualified across New York, mostly registered voters who, thought they were voting at the right polling place and didn't think they would be disenfranchised. Those votes were actually thrown out. And so ending the Wrong Church rule, it was long overdue here in New York, but the legislature has stepped up. And as I mentioned, New York here is an outlier where you see a trend of voter suppression laws being passed and introduced across the nation. New York here is taking a step in the opposite direction.
Of course, so the session ends tomorrow. What's the likelihood of the House actually getting to this bill?
Yes. So we expect the Assembly to pass this bill either today or tomorrow. And we're actually hearing that the session will bleed over into Friday. So there might be an extension here to Friday to get this done. But there have been no major concerns raised on the Assembly side that this bill will not pass. So from where I sit, we expect this bill to pass by the end of session. And we look forward to Governor Hochul signing it as soon as possible.
All right. Reggie Thetford, again, we certainly appreciate you joining us with Stand Up America, and hopefully we'll see something happen when it comes to this particular bill. Reggie, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, folks, got to go to the break. We come back. We're going to talk with our panel, not only about this, but also we're going to talk about what is happening on the federal level when it comes to voting. Are Democrats going to actually make some type of move to try to get something done between now and November? We'll talk about that and other issues right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk, and we fight.
It's time for a change!
Reconstruyamos esta gran nación!
See, we are people of resilience. As we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Godfrey, the funniest dude on the planet. And you're watching
Roland Martin Unfiltered. Ow.
All right, folks, breaking news here. The shooter, the individual, the white domestic terrorist who shot and killed 10 black people in Buffalo is now facing 25 counts. 25 counts of murder and hate crime as well. And this is a perfect example where some black people need to learn to shut up. I dealt with people last week who were like, man, it's a doggone shame. They charged the Buffalo guy with 1 count. 10 black people shot and killed and charged with 1 count. Can some people learn to chill out and allow the law to do what the law does? It literally drives me crazy. So if you look at the 25 counts that now come down, I'm going to read these in just a second. But I want to bring in my panel, A. Scott Bolden, a lawyer here in Washington, D.C., Monique Presley, who also joins us, lawyer, crisis manager, host of Make It Make Sense with Monique Presley on Instagram, and Dr. Niambi Carter with Howard University, political science professor. And so, Scott, I want to start with you because it literally drives me crazy when these Twitter lawyers start talking who don't know a damn thing about nothing. I mean, and there were people last week, and again, I listened to them, and they were like, oh my God, they only charged this guy, with 1 count, and he killed 10 people. And it's kind of like, y'all, seriously, do you actually think he's only gonna get charged with 1 count? This is the New York Times lead. The man accused of carrying out a racist shooting in Buffalo supermarket has been indicted by grand jury on 25 counts, including murder, domestic terrorism, and other charges related to the May 14th massacre. Peyton Gendron, 18, of course, who was arrested. And again, folks, for all the people who kept running their mouths, don't go back, please. This is what it says. The 25 count indictment includes 10 counts of first-degree murder, 10 counts of second-degree murder charges as hate crimes, as well as 3 counts of attempted murder as a hate crime, and a single count of criminal possession of a weapon. The indictment's first count, domestic terrorism motivated by hate, carries a penalty of life imprisonment without parole. Scott, this is, it is maddening when I have to deal with people on social media who go, see, they don't care about black people, he only got charged with 1 count. So can you explain to people how prosecutors operate when they are processing an individual like this and then determining in terms of what they're going to do? Because again, it was just crazy last week. Listen to people say, oh, how they don't care about black people because he only got charged with 1 count. This is a grand jury that came back. Go ahead.
As a state prosecutor who investigated murder cases, just 1 murder takes a great deal of time. 10 murders in a domestic terrorism case down in Texas, as tragic as it was, the government wants to get it right. The prosecutors want to get it right. Only a New York State prosecutor can authorize an arrest for murder in that state. And so in Texas, while I'm not familiar with the authorization, I can tell you, gathering the evidence, interviewing witnesses, gathering the shells that were used to murder our children, and looking at not the evidence, but the damage done by that AK-C or R-15 takes time. You have multi-agency jurisdictions. You have multiple police agencies. You have evidence. You have to walk that site in a line with other multiple agencies to make sure you're not missing any shell casings. You're not missing any bloody socks, if you will. I'm sorry. The other thing is the damage was so bad. Remember, they were asking parents for DNA.
Well, that's Uvalde. I'm talking here about Buffalo. And that's this case here, and that's the thing that I'm trying to get people to understand.
Okay,
that folks have to. First of all, the Uvalde case, the guy's been shot and killed. The issue that I'm trying to walk people with Buffalo is that again, what happened last week, that was just one thing. But they went to a grand jury and then presented all of it to the grand jury, and then they came back again with 25 counts. And so, just like in the case in Minnesota, where Attorney General Keith Ellison overruled the Hennepin County DA when it came to the death of George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, and then went back and said, no, these are what the charges are going to be. You don't just rush. And people were like, well, the guy had the gun, he live streamed it, and he got arrested, that's it. No, there's still a legal process that you have to go through.
Well, you don't want to overcharge the case or undercharge it. And more importantly, if you rush, you're going to make mistakes. And if under criminal law, if you make mistakes or you pass a bad indictment or it doesn't meet the criminal elements of those charges, right, then you're going to have to dismiss the charges and figure out a way to hold this racist killer. And so patience is always a virtue. And the other thing you got to always look out for, Roland, is, okay, they've charged him with 25 counts. They're still investigating. They may find other stuff that he did in preparing for this, and they can supersede the indictment. So patience is a virtue, but you could be dead wrong if you rush it. And that's really what the only point I think you're trying to make and the one I'm making as well.
Well, but it's also, Monique, trying to get some folks to understand that if you don't know the law, sometimes it's good just to be quiet. I remember being in Dallas it was a church there where they had a public forum after the killing of Botham Jean. And the DA was there, the attorneys for Botham Jean's family were there, and all of these people were yelling, prosecute her for first-degree murder. And the attorneys were like, okay, y'all might want to chill out, because folks didn't understand the law, didn't understand what you can charge someone with that could get a longer prison sentence. It was all these different variations, and it was interesting talking to Ben Crump and the other attorneys, and they were going, I wish people would stop yelling out what should be done, because they don't understand what the law in Texas says, especially when it involves a peace officer.
Right.
Yeah, and also that was going to mess with everybody's money. I mean, I'm going to call a thing. The family would have potentially not been able to recover, because the police department would then end up disavowing the actions of the law enforcement agent is outside of their responsibilities there, and not want to take responsibility for it, and therefore not want to settle or to give the family anything that they deserve for that. And that is something that happens when there's a criminal conviction, especially in a place like Texas, where there isn't the same type of policy that's set up in DC, where DC is self-indemnified and you can pretty much ask for $100 million and try to get it. It's not so in Texas. But I want to back up to your original point and question. Roland, I agree with you that people make assumptions, they make quick assumptions, and that they assume, sometimes in ignorance where the law is concerned, that the first thing they hear is the only thing that they hear, and that we've been done wrong. But there's a reason for that. The distrust of the legal system, the distrust of law enforcement, the distrust of prosecutors, the distrust of government representatives, that is well-based. And so people automatically in our community assume first that they're going to do us wrong, and then end up relieved or pleasantly surprised in a very unpleasant situation when the government actually does what it's supposed to do. So you, as a person who has knowledge of it, can expect it's going to be done. Scott or me, having tried cases and been on the side of the issue where you have to dot your I's and cross your T's, we can expect that it's going to be done, even in this case in Buffalo. So prosecutors in that position have an opportunity to charge directly. They don't even have to go to a grand jury in many instances, or to go to the grand jury. Many prosecutors, especially high profile cases like this where it matters that you get it right, feel more comfortable having an indictment where the grand jury has looked at evidence and decided on the charges. So they give one quick charge to hold, like, you're not going to be out here unindicted. So we're going to charge you with something, and then we're going to go to the grand jury for the rest. And then, as Scott said, we'll likely come back to proceed that indictment with the rest. After they've done the background research, there may be other crimes. You know, we may see some terrorism charges. Who knows?
Gotcha. But
it comes from a place of pain.
I get it coming from a place of pain. I get that. But I also, in this age of social media, Niambi, that what drives me crazy is when people put stuff out there and it comes from what some might consider to be credible voices, and then it just takes off. And then what it does, it gets people upset, hot and bothered, and now all of a sudden you're like, yo, chill, calm down, and that's what I'm saying. This is where I'm a firm believer, and also in why we believe in talking to black law enforcement, black lawyers, folks who understand this here, and now we see the reality in terms of what this white domestic terrorist is now being charged with. It wasn't one. We know he killed 10 people, but now we see exactly what those charges are.
For sure. But I think, with social media, a lie travels faster than the truth a lot of times. And the thing about social media is everybody's used to getting everything right then, right in that moment. The speed with which we now can traffic information, to your point, makes it much more dangerous than it used to be. You don't have to wait for a printing press to put out the newspaper the next day, and maybe you can have a moment to come back. When you put something out in a tweet, particularly for folks who have like a lot of followers, and that thing becomes retweeted, it has a life of its own. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of time for reflection on social media. People say things without thinking often. And then by the time you get to maybe a retraction or at least an update or revision of what you said, the bad stuff is already out there and has already made its way across multiple platforms on social media. But I also think the thing about social media is everybody becomes an armchair expert in something, right? Everybody becomes a genius around tech, or everybody becomes a genius around the law or politics or whatever it may be, journalism, right? Not thinking about these things as having a real logic behind them or a real skill or any kind of training. And I think that's sort of the era that we live in with social media, where everybody can sort of be an armchair expert on things that they don't know very much about or things that they don't have intimate knowledge of. And I'm certain the prosecutors, at least in this case, wanted to probably keep some things very close to the vest because they are still going to be involved in these investigations for months and months to come leading up to trial. So, we can't expect to know everything, but we live in a moment where everybody can be an expert on anything because of social media.
Absolutely. And so, again, it's always trying to walk people through this here. Now, folks, in Uvalde, Texas, more funerals today. The family and friends, of course, gathered to say their final goodbyes to Robb Elementary School student Jose Flores Jr., teacher Irma Garcia, and her husband, Joe. Irma died in the shooting, but of course, Joe had a heart attack 2 days after visiting his wife's memorial. The school, now, on other news, folks, which is crazy, the school district police chief, who served as the on-site commander during last week's deadly shooting, who told cops not to go in, he finally addressed his claims that the department was not complying with the Department of Justice probe into the police response during the shooting. Consolidated Independent School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo got cornered by a reporter with CNN. Watch this.
We're not going to release anything. We have people in our community being buried, so we're going to be respectful.
I just want your reaction
we're going to be
the Director McGraw saying that you were responsible for the decision
to
go into that room. How do you explain yourself to the parents?
We're going to be respectful to the family.
I understand that, but you have an opportunity to explain yourself to the parents.
And just so you know, we're going to do that eventually, obviously.
When?
And whenever this is done, and let the families quit grieving, then we'll do that, obviously. And just so everybody knows, We've been in contact with DPS every day, just so you all know.
They say They say that you're not cooperating.
I've been on the phone with them every day.
They say you're not cooperating. So just 2 seconds.
Just so you know, we've been talking to them every day.
What is your reaction?
Y'all have a good day.
What is your reaction, sir?
Now, this is the same police chief who was quietly sworn in as a member of the city council. Now, students and staff will not be returning to Robb Elementary campus this year, and school officials are figuring out where students will attend classes in the fall. You might remember in Sandy Hook, they literally tore down that school and built a new one. Now, Governor Greg Abbott is requesting the state legislature create committees to develop plans to prevent mass shootings from happening. He's sending a letter to lawmakers asking for that. But the thing that I don't quite understand here, Monique, guys, you can go ahead and show it, please. Go ahead. I don't understand. This is the same governor who called multiple special sessions to deal with voter suppression, but now he's saying, oh, well, let's just do some committees to deal with school safety.
Is that for me?
Yes, Monique.
Oh, he's a demon. I don't know what to say. He doesn't. I can't name all of the different ways that this man has derelicted his duty, has abandoned his post, has not kept Texans safe. And why do I care? My mama, my daddy, my auntie, my uncle, my everybody is a Texan. And when we're talking power grids, when we're talking storm response, when we're talking turning away Affordable Care Act money, when we're talking not having access to what they need during a pandemic, when we're talking mental health response, and this, you know, I mean, what was that tweet that went around? Why is Texas second in sales for
yeah, he sent a tweet out several years ago lamenting the fact that Texas was second in gun sales to California and said, Texas, we got to do better.
He's a shame. I mean, it's so serious. There's so many families that are grieving, and I pray that after the Justice Department does its investigation, that they find a way to sue him and them up one side and down the other, because they deserve it. Will that bring back a single child or teacher? No, it won't. But it will be the closest thing we can get to justice in this case.
Niambi, the thing here again, he was so quick and saying he will keep calling special sessions over and over and over, voter suppression. You would think with 4 mass shootings in Texas in the last 5 years, might be a more sense, and 2 of those involve schools, one in Santa Fe and now Uvalde. You would think there'd be a more sense of urgency versus, hey, let's form some new committees.
Well, I mean, look, committees are a quick way for people to look like they're doing something while they're doing nothing. A committee with no budget, first of all, is telling you everything that this governor thinks about that committee. He's asking these people to come together to tell them what public health and other officials have been telling people for years and years and years. Guns do not make people safer, and they certainly do not make our schools safer for our children and our teachers and our staff who work in those spaces. He doesn't need a committee to tell him this, but he doesn't actually want to do anything about gun safety in the state of Texas because it's going to cost him votes. So he's going to call a committee, not give them any power. They're not going to have a budget. They're not going to have any enforcement authority. And then they're going to give him recommendations that he's going to look at and then shake his head and say, well, there's no money for this, or this is too radical. If, you know, and if he's picking the committee, God knows, I mean, it's not going to change anything anyway. So committees don't move the needle on anything. It's going to be a nice report that goes nowhere. So Governor Abbott, is doing nothing around children's safety by calling this committee. And as you said, he could very well call a special legislative session and try to actually get something on the books that would make us safer right now in the state of Texas. And he's not going to do that.
Scott?
Yeah, why do I need a committee to tell me what I know already? What's missing from these mass murders that we've seen over the last 10, 20 years that we don't know? I'm not an expert. I can tell you all kinds of things that you should do. I could write legislation to make guns unavailable to the mentally ill. I would make them apply for judicial review if they wanted to buy a gun, if they had a mental history. The school committees, what are they going to say? They're going to look at the same data we have and come up with recommendations. You're going to make the schools a fortress, if you will, and you get educated inside a fortress. The only thing that's going to save these kids vis-a-vis a school committee is that you have zero access from outsiders into the school during the day when the kids are there. That's not very reasonable. But you can make it harder to get guns, if you will. You can enforce gun safety laws and close the loopholes and what have you and say enough is enough. You certainly could do a lot of legislation, call a special session versus having a school committee. And so it's like guns don't kill people, people kill people. So we don't have a gun problem here. It's like George Floyd was an extreme, and we can all say that was a racist act, but racism is all around us. He's the same person that would argue that institutional racism does not exist in this country. And so he just doesn't get it.
All right, folks, hold tight. We're going to go to a break. We come back. We're going to talk with Charles Booker, who dropped a major ad today against incumbent Senator Rand Paul. They'll be facing off in November for that U.S. Senate seat. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, please. Same thing on Facebook. Hit the like and the share button as well. We should be sitting at 1,000 likes easy in the first 40 minutes of the show, so go ahead and do that right now. Don't forget, if you download the Black Star Network app, available on all platforms: Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Xbox One, and Samsung Smart TV. Also, folks, be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club, where every dollar you give goes to support this show. Send your check and money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We'll be right back.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach and host of Get Wealthy. On the next Get Wealthy, here's the good news. Black women are the fastest growing segment of business owners. The not so good news, the average business by Black women is only earning revenues of $45,000 or less. On the next Get Wealthy, you're gonna hear from a woman who went from her kitchen table to cat tables, growing her business to over $1 million.
You should start a business because your product is needed in the world, not because you hate the person that you work with. If you hate your job and you hate your manager, go find a new job, a place that makes you feel comfortable. And I say that because starting a business is truly a labor of love and service.
If you want to learn how to do it, right here on the next Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Hey everybody, it's your man Fred Hammond.
Hi, my name is Brescia Webb, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Ow. Well, I like a nice filter usually, but we can be unfiltered.
All right, folks. Charles Booker, he is running against U.S. Senator Rand Paul in November for that particular seat. Today, he dropped this ad that got the attention of lots of folks. Check it out.
The pain of our past persists to this day. In Kentucky, like many states throughout the South, lynching was a tool of terror. It was used to kill hopes for freedom. It was used to kill my ancestors. Now, in a historic victory for our Commonwealth, I have become the first Black Kentuckian to receive the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate. My opponent, the very person who compared expanded health care to slavery. The person who said he would have opposed the Civil Rights Act. The person who single-handedly blocked an anti-lynching act from being federal law. The choice couldn't be clearer. Do we move forward together, or do we let politicians like Rand Paul forever hold us back and drive us apart? In November, we will choose healing. We will choose Kentucky.
Charles Booker Jones is right now from Louisville, Kentucky. Glad to have you back on the show. That had to be, we certainly understand what you were doing and why you were doing it, but it certainly was not easy to put a noose around your neck.
Absolutely, brother. That was one of the hardest things as someone who appreciates storytelling and the power of creativity. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And it was something that fell on my spirit in the sense of lifting up the truth of the challenges we face. But it was hard. And I feel the responsibility to shine that light, even if it means being vulnerable in the heaviest of ways. That was personal for me.
Rand Paul stood in the way, choosing not to allow unanimous consent. And that bill's passage was delayed more than a year because of his obstinance.
That's absolutely right. And what I'm trying to lift up in this ad here is really shining a light on who he is. Rand Paul has shown us himself. He is someone who throws up smoke screens. He has essentially gaslighted the country throughout his career. He is someone who stokes hate and division and racism every chance he gets, and then whistles away as we fight amongst ourselves. And just this last week, Rand Paul opposed moving forward with even debate on domestic terrorism legislation following the heinous act in Buffalo, where lives were taken away because of the color of their skin. And that very same incident happened here in Kentucky at a Kroger in Louisville. So Rand Paul knows what this pain means, but dismissed it because he said, well, we have interracial marriage now and churches are integrated. He is dangerous. We want to laugh at him. We want to dismiss him, but he is really the arsonist burning down our pursuit of democracy. And I'm calling it out so that we can beat him.
That particular bill there, only one Republican in the House voted for it. All the Republicans in the U.S. Senate indeed blocked that from moving forward. There were a lot of people who were complaining that nothing was done after Buffalo, but the reality is it was Congressman Jamal Bowman who advanced that particular bill, a CBC member who put that bill up. The House passed it, so people can't act like that did not exist. But this is an example of what happens when you have 50 Republicans in the U.S. Senate, 50 Democrats, and you have 2 Democrats who don't want to break the filibuster. And what I keep saying to people is that if people stop just whining and complaining or saying what was not being done, that if you look at, holding Democratic seats in Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, holding those seats, and then in Arizona as well, and then looking at expanding the map, potentially there could be a 55-45, 57-43 Democratic advantage in the United States Senate, therefore nullifying, if you will, the opposition to ending the filibuster by Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin.
That's absolutely right, and that's why I am stressing to our allies across the country, this race is critically important. We need to win races just like this one here in Kentucky, and Roland, I've said quite clearly that this type of race will define whether we are going to continue our pursuit of democracy or not. It's going to help decide the fate. And it's not just because Rand Paul is horrific and embarrassing and terrible, but it's because we're running against hate and division at a time when it is really tearing at the fiber of our country. And, I see the opportunity for us to realize healing and to do it together across divides, from the hood to the holler, as I often say. And so this campaign to me is our chance to stand as family, to call out hate, but to lift a vision that's bigger. And getting rid of the filibuster, having an expanded majority, will allow us to do so much good right now, so we can't miss this moment, and we're not going to.
A couple of years ago, you faced off against Amy McGrath in the Democratic primary to face Senator Mitch McConnell. You came up short. What lessons did you learn from that defeat that you hope not to repeat in November?
Well, one of the biggest lessons that I learned at that time, honestly, was that the people of Kentucky are ready. It was a hypothesis, a prayer that I had, of faith in Kentucky, that if I stood up and spoke the truth in areas where Trump won handily, if I showed up in communities that historically voted Democrat but don't turn out anymore because they think no one cares, that if I do that work, people will respond, and they did. And so the lesson we're taking from that now, and what we've done over this past year winning this primary, is we've been organizing early. I have over 20,000 volunteers across Kentucky that are organizing on issues, and some of them have had MAGA hats. And because we're leaning in at a time when Democrats have said there's no chance, and Republicans have said we got it in the bag, we'll sow up hate, stew hate, and weaponize racism, we are building a new coalition. We're expanding the electorate, and we're proving the doubters wrong. And we're going to blow Rand Paul out this year. And I'm asking everyone to go to charlesbooker.org and help us do just that.
When you talk about running, obviously you do not have a significant black population in Kentucky in terms of, representing 20, 30% of the electorate. And so what type of coalition are you putting together? And then if we look at the numbers of people who turn out in the primary, not a significant number. And so how are you going to get those disaffected people to turn out? Because that actually could be the margin of victory, getting those people who are sitting on the sidelines.
Oh, that's absolutely right. This is about how we turn out support. And the support I'm speaking of is not just Democrats. The issues that I lift up, fighting to end generational poverty, making sure that no one has to ration their insulin like I have, that you can turn on the faucet and clean water will come out, that we can be safe in our homes, that no one else's door will be busted down by the agency we pay for to protect and serve us. These issues aren't actually partisan. And so we're building a coalition rooted on our common bonds that really reminds me of the power of the Rainbow Coalition, and understanding that Kentucky is a state that is nearly 90% white. We have to speak to the truths that bring us together. Addressing structural racism and lifting up hard realities like this video that we did today isn't just about speaking to the Black community. It's about speaking to all of us in our collective struggle and our collective responsibility to one another. And so by addressing the issues we're really facing and speaking boldly and going to places that get ignored and left behind, the forgotten places, we're finding a ready coalition. And this is exactly why Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul are terrified. And we're going to shine a light for the country in this race. And I'm honored to do it.
All right, then. Well, Charles Booker, certainly good luck in your efforts. And again, a very powerful opening ad.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it. I want to talk about ads and how you capture the attention. In the wake of the shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde, someone on Twitter put this particular video together to give people an understanding of how Republicans use guns in many of their political advertisements.
Ready? Aim.
I'm Kathleen Wall, and I approve this message.
It's time to fight back.
I'm Greg Gianforte. I approve this message.
Joni's gonna unload.
I'm Joni Ernst, and I approve this message.
I'm Matt Rosendale, and I approve this message.
Pro gun.
I'm Jake Beckett, and I approve this message.
I'm going to blow away the Democrats.
I believe in individual liberty and personal responsibility.
I'm Marjorie Green.
I'm Mike Collins, and I approve this message.
I'm Hutton Rideout. Care to join me? I'm Kay Daly.
I'm Brian Kemp. I own guns.
That all depends on the caliber of our candidates.
I'm Pamela Gorman, and I approve this message.
The Second Amendment is about hunting.
I'm Dean Heller.
I'm Catherine Temple.
I'm Jim Lehman.
And I approve
this message.
I'm Eric Greitens.
I'm Garris O'Donnell. We're
and
at
return this country back to its former glory.
How to use a rifle.
Bill Ray running for Congress.
I'm Dave McCormick.
My name is J.R. Majewski.
I'm Will Brooks.
I'm Hunter Hill.
I'm Max Miller.
I'm Lindsey Graham.
Governor Janice
I'm Doug
McGeehan.
Robinson.
And I approve this message. And I absolutely approve this message.
I'm Dr. Oz.
I'm Kat Kamek.
I'm Ron Gould.
And I approve this message.
For God's sake, we have to have the courage to stand up to the industry.
That ain't going to happen.
That's why the NRA endorsed me.
I'm Joe Manchin, and I approve this message.
And while we were running that particular compilation there, this breaking news out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, at least one dead, multiple people injured after shots fired at a medical building in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This literally happened just a few moments ago. According to the Tulsa World, police believe that, just give me 1 second, I'm pulling this up as we speak. According to the Tulsa World, police believe that one of the people injured is the assailant. This here is video from the Tulsa World's website. Let me see if I can go ahead and expand this and play it. Go right ahead.
Behind me, multiple killed. We have several people shot. We've got fire working with our SWAT team and the initial officers on the scene to get as many people out as possible. Right now, it's a quiet scene, so there's no one actively shooting inside. So we are doing a floor-by-floor, room-by-room search to make sure that we don't have anybody else outstanding in the building. We're starting a slow evacuation. There's no technical active shooter where someone's actually discharging rounds at this time. If we go into a situation where someone is discharging rounds, we're going to address that situation with a contingent of officers and follow that. So right now, it's settled down. We're trying to rescue those who are injured, and we're treating this as a catastrophic scene in there right now. So we're trying our best to navigate through every single floor. We're having some difficulties getting through some locked doors, but we're locking floor by floor down, and we're bringing more and more officers in here so we can safely clear the entire building. We have multiple floors, 5 or more floors right now, with hundreds of rooms and hundreds of people within the building. So you have to give us some time on this. Right now, we believe that the primary shooter is down. So unless we have intelligence that another shooter is in the building, we'll work.
So that was, again, a video from the Tulsa World. Niambi, I want to start with you. That spot that we ran right before going to that particular story, I mean, shows you, to me, how sick and demented this country is when folks will well, it's a badge of honor for them to have have guns in commercials as a way to appeal to voters.
Yeah, I mean, our proximity to guns usually says something about our power, especially for male candidates, their masculinity, and for women, in particular white women who want to approximate that same kind of masculinity, that same kind of strength. A gun becomes a way to do that. The problem, of course, is we know guns have real consequences. And when we're talking about political ads more generally, whether we're talking about this ad on television or ads made like the one Charles Booker was just speaking of, the one that he just dropped today, the truth is ads do very little to bring people to you. They work for the people who are already supportive for you, but they do very little. The only exception typically is in battleground states. And where we see a lot of these ads, unfortunately, these people are running in safe districts, in safe states. So they don't really have a lot of competition. And so the ad, whether it's a positive or negative ad, whether it's shocking or whether it's provocative, what they really do is bring your name to the fore. That's what they do. And that can be important. That's valuable for sure. But nobody is winning and losing elections based on political advertisements alone. And unfortunately, ads like this, for some, are just going to reinforce why these people like Joe Manchin and Marjorie Greene, et cetera, are in Congress or in their local state houses, and why they're the right choices, right? These these violent incidents just say we just need more guns, not less.
But one of the things, Monique, in talking, when you're looking at with Shannon Watts with Mom's Demand and work that they have been doing, what these incidents have done is shaken people, some folks to their core, and forced them to get involved. You look at what 11 Films and Don Winslow, the author, how they've been utilizing video to get people to understand how significant this is. I'm going to play for you. This here is, again, a piece that the folks with 11 Films put together in the wake of Uvalde and Buffalo.
I'm done, okay? I'm done. I've had it. They fucking failed our kids again. You know, how many more times?
I'd hoped when I became president, I would not have to do this again. To lose a child is like having a piece of your soul ripped away.
Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad.
There's a hollowness in your chest. You feel like you're being sucked into it.
How am I going to plan a funeral? What kind of casket? I have to write a eulogy. All I did was send them to school.
90% of us are living under the tyranny of 10%.
Sit down. You're out of line.
They seem angrier at Beto O'Rourke than they were at the massacre of 19 children and 2 fourth-grade teachers.
And I'm trying to figure out at what point in time this became so normalized.
The AR-15 shreds the human body. Just think about that. Think about what that would do to a little 10-year-old body.
What in God's name do you need a solvent for except to kill someone?
And you read their age. 10.
I have a 4th grader, and she put her hands in her friend's blood and then smeared it, she said, all over her body. She wanted to look like she was dead.
What are we doing?
And we were all hiding behind a stage.
What are we doing?
He said bro.
He said bro. Red flag.
Why only in America? It is just an American problem, sir.
America needs us to scream for them right now.
People are getting shot all around me.
When are we gonna do something?
Yeah, I was bullied in school too. I never shot at my fucking classmates. Next fucking excuse.
So honestly, to hell with anybody who says don't politicize this.
This is about semi-automatic weapons and military weapons that are killing our children in school.
Monique?
Yeah. You know, I have school-age children, and I take them to school every day with prayer. And I even some days, like the side door, because one of my children is in an autism unit at a public school, and I am so thankful every time. Like, if I don't get him there by the time the special education officer goes in, that door is locked. So if I try to go in that door, I can't get in. If I go to the front, I've got to push the buzzer. They've got to know that it's me. I've got to go through 2 doors in order to get in. And that gives me the little bit of additional security added to my prayers. But the people whose children were killed, they had faith in prayer. They knew God too. So especially I hear sometimes Christians who were saying, all you can do is pray. God's going to take care of you. Like, they don't give a damn about nobody else. this grieves me because I still have my children. And I don't want to know what this is. And so when we talk about solutions, frankly, this last shooting of these children in Uvalde was the first time I texted my cousin, and I was like, I'm always this person who's saying, but we need to be part of the solution. We need to be in there fixing it. We need to not give up. Frankly, that day, Roland, I was like, I don't care about these people. I don't care about this country. Do I have an obligation to get the hell out of here so that I'm in some place that does not have this gun sickness, so that I do not have to pray these kinds of prayers over my children just for them to get an education? Is this what people are calculating as the cost of being in the land of the free, the home of the... There is nothing free or brave about having to have all of those weapons of war so that you can feel good about yourself. This is pathetic. It is dark. It is demonic. It is amoral. And all I can say is that we have an opportunity when we vote for all of these people who were saying they're for common sense gun reform. You have to show up at the ballot and mean that. You say you care about a woman's right to her body, you have to show up and vote that way, because you're polling one direction. But then when you go into that booth, you check out these GOP boxes off of some sense of whatever. I guess we're going to have to wait for Roland's book to come out for us to fully explain what y'all are afraid of. But for me, it's obvious that you're not voting your conscience and you're not voting your concern for your fellow man. And that is what it's going to take in November and beyond for us to put this country in a better position.
Scott, this was the cover of the New York Times Sunday Review. That was quite jarring. It listed Uvalde, Buffalo, Boulder, Colorado, Atlanta, Dayton, Ohio, El Paso, Virginia Beach, Thousand Oaks, California, Pittsburgh, Parkland, Florida, Sutherland Springs, Texas, Las Vegas, Orlando, Roseburg, Oregon, Oak Creek, and in every single instance, it said authorities said the gunman was able to obtain the weapon legally.
Yep. You know, Roland, I've been so reflective on this, and I was thinking about Monique and her children. I was thinking about my children who are grown, and you know, this is just insane. It's just insane. And have you noticed on that list that you just did, that list has increased significantly each year. You know, you'd have one, then two. Now, you must have at least 20 this year already, or some ungodly name, a number. And then that prior ad that you ran that talked about the elected officials who do ads with guns, right? And then they get elected. So what's insane is America has cut a deal with the Second Amendment as the foundation, a deal to accept mass violence in exchange for owning a weapon of mass destruction or 9mm or Second Amendment right, however you couch it. This country has accepted this as a dastardly deal. A deal with the devil, a deal with shooters and killers and the mentally ill and the evil and the hate. They've actually cut a deal to tolerate the killing of our kids on a mass scale in exchange for the right to own a gun. And then they vote for Republicans who won't do a damn thing about it and are revered. They may take over the House and Senate in about 6 months or 5 months. Think about what I'm saying, Roland. Think about it. How insane this is, and we won't do anything about it. So America's acceptance of mass destruction, of violence, and the shooting of our kids in public and private schools, we've accepted it. We ought to be ashamed. I'm ashamed of this country. I'm ashamed that I have to listen to Monique, who has to struggle with her kids, drop her kids off, autism or not, and not know, really not know whether she's going to see them again. Think about that. Think about that. That ought to make all of us crazy. And the majority of Americans, or some large amount of Americans, have accepted this violence as okay.
And if you want to,
Shameful.
if you want
It's just shameful.
if you want to understand Don Winslow, before I go to break, I'm gonna show you this here. Don Winslow, the author, put this together where he just branded it hashtag Republicans don't care. Just watch this.
We share a tiny part of the burden in our own hearts, and that we will lift the victims and their families and the entire community in prayer. My colleagues from Florida will carry home the prayers of the whole Senate for victims and their families, for the community of Parkland, and for the first responders who bravely charge into harm's way on behalf of others. The Senate and all Americans stand in mourning, sorrow, and sympathy with the students, faculty, staff, and families of Santa Fe High School in Texas. We pray fervently that in the midst of this nightmare of grief, our Heavenly Father will make manifest to those families His promise in Psalm 34, that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted.
Don't believe a fucking word that Mitch McConnell says. Not a fucking word.
The reality is this. If you're going to be voting in November, the question is, are you going to vote for candidates who are going to do something to protect America's children, or are you going to vote for candidates who are with a party that will do nothing because the NRA tells them to do so? The thing that people have to start doing, whether they are in Texas or they're in Buffalo or they're in any part of this country, is they're going to have to make a decision. Who are you with? What do you care about? Running those particular spots was extremely emotional. There are folks, I see your comments, folks who are crying, people who are tearful, folks who are angry, but I need people to understand that the people who we elect, they're the ones who are the policymakers. They're the ones who actually hold the power to deal with this. I have been seeing conservatives mock Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau because he dared to actually step up and take action. I've seen people like Senator Ted Cruz. Oh, he was in a poker game the other night. No concerns about Uvalde. I'm looking at individuals who make excuses. But the question is, those of you who are watching, those of you who are listening, what are you prepared to do? Are you going to sit silently by and just say, well, you know what, there's nothing that we can do? Or are you going to say, I'm going to get involved? I would hope that the massacre in Buffalo and the massacre in Uvalde, Texas, would cause more Americans to say, I cannot afford to sit out the next election because I don't agree with the candidate on all issues. Or they say there's this one thing they don't support, so therefore I can't do it. If we as the American people continue to be silent, and when I say silent, I'm not saying people who remark on social media. I'm not saying people who make comments on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. No, I'm talking about silent in terms of not registering and not voting. Every single one of those people using guns in their commercial can actually be defeated if enough people actually give a damn. Going to a break, we come back, we'll talk with independent journalist Roland Starr about Ukraine, his work on the ground there, and what is next in that battle. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. right here on the Black Star Network.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low-Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk, and we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Hi, this is Cheryl Lee Ralph.
Hello, everyone. It's Kiara Sheard.
Hey, I'm Taj.
I'm Coco.
And I'm Lily. And we're SWV.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Folks, Angelina Dumas has been missing since May 19th from Derry, New Hampshire. The 16-year-old is 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighs 110 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information about Angelina Dumas should call the New Hampshire State Police at 603-666-3334, 603-666-3334. Folks, the war in Ukraine continues to go on as we speak. This battle has been going on for quite some time as Ukrainian forces battle Russian forces for control of that country. We have seen various nations across the world step up, offer resources and other things for the Ukrainian people to battle the Russians. We have seen reactions in so many different areas, including the sports world, where athletes who refuse to disavow the Russian actions, they've actually been denied an opportunity to actually participate in sports. Fundraisers have been going on as well. Nobel laureate said he plans to sell his Nobel Prize in order to send that money to Ukraine. The United States has passed a bill to send upwards of $40 billion to Ukraine as possible. The Biden administration also announced they're going to be sending Ukraine a small number of high-tech, medium-range rocket systems. It will take at least 3 weeks for Ukraine to get the weapons and train troops on how to use them. As I said, last month, Congress agreed to send the Ukrainian people $40 billion for the war efforts. Joining us right now is an independent journalist who was there on the ground when war broke out, and that is Thru Starr. He joins us now here in D.C. Thru, glad to have you here. So for people who saw the news, they saw these various reports, they saw what was happening there. Take us through in terms of what you were seeing, what you were experiencing, that again gets people to understand the true impact of war.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show, Roland. And so I'll just start off by telling people that this is going to be a long, protracted war. I woke up on February 24th, like many other millions of people across the country did, to explosions around us. And so just imagine waking up not knowing where those bombs, where those missiles are going to land. And so waking up to explosions, to people screaming, to reports in local news of people dying on the spot from strikes, also creating massive immigration crisis across the border that many people saw, particularly with students of color, immigrants, etc. And you also saw a lot of Russian infighting, their war crimes that are widely reported that's taking place there. I was roughly about 20 minutes or so away from Russian troops as they were taking suburbs around the city, and ultimately those troops were pushed off by Ukrainian forces. But the problem right now is that there are more Russians and more Russian artillery than there are Ukrainians to fight those people, even though they're fighting valiantly. So this $40 billion that you mentioned, Roland, is actually going to help Ukrainians to hopefully to reclaim a lot of the territory that the Russians have taken, because many people are saying, well, why are we sending so much money to Ukraine? Why does that matter to us? Well, you can answer that in a multitude of ways. For one, we can either send $40 billion or we can send 15,000 to 20,000 troops to do the fighting and send our own troops in there, because one of the things that people are not aware of is that there are 4 NATO countries that border Ukraine. And in any instance where Russia is threatening to any of those nations, if a missile were to accidentally go into one of those countries, that could potentially that could potentially trigger Article 5, which means that if you attack one of us, you attack all of us. That means your aunties, that means your sisters, your cousins, your brothers, who are U.S. troops, many of whom are already deployed in Eastern Europe, are going to have to fight this war. And so that is just generally a synopsis of what's going on, and this war is definitely going to be protracted.
There are the point that you made about the amount of money being spent. Mm-hmm. I've seen black folks say, well, if we could send $40 billion to Ukraine, why can't they give $40 billion to black people?
Well, that's how budgets don't necessarily work like that. A lot of this money for a wide range of reasons are allocated through various means, particularly in defense anyway. And another thing too, it goes back to what I said originally. We could either send the $40 billion or we can send your cousin to fight. Because the idea is that if we give Ukraine enough arms, enough military, and it's not just military aid, it's humanitarian aid, but then there's another moral question of, how much are we willing to invest in another human being's humanity? And then what if something were to happen to people on the continent of Africa? Are we going to say, well, it's those people over there, yeah, they're black people, but they're not our problem? I mean, some people do say that, right? And so it comes down to how do you want your world to be governed, and what world do you want to live in America? Whether we want to war with Putin is not relevant. The relevant point that we need to accept is that Putin, in his actions, wants to war with the West. And so one of the ways to deal with that is with that military aid, and it does help to fit, because ultimately what's happening here is that the United States is doing what's called low-hanging fruit. And so they're doing everything possible not to really involve themselves too deeply. You mentioned those short to long-range missile systems. there. And so that was kind of like what Putin's saying, this is our red line. If you send these missiles that can strike into Russia, then we're going to attack you. And so, or it didn't say necessarily going to attack, but he mentioned the red line, which is implicit of we're going to attack you. And so all this is low-hanging fruit. And so, and all of that in theory is designed to ensure that we don't send our own troops there. So which one do you want? That's the.
But people also, I think people, look, let's just be real here. Part of the fundamental problem is that Americans are isolationists, where we operate where nothing else matters. Whatever's happening around the world, there's no bearing on us. It means nothing. It means nothing to us. Yet people also have to understand that if you're the same person who's complaining about gas prices, complaining about inflation, you have to understand we're living in a global economy. And so what's happening with Ukraine, what's happening with Russia, has a direct impact on what's happening economically here in the United States.
And also, it's another issue about grain. So if you have Odessa, for example, and I wish we had a map here to really show it, is that the Russians have a blockade on the seaport city of Odessa, which is one of the largest cities in Ukraine of over 1 million people. And so there are 20 million tons of grain. And I'm not going to try to point to it particularly, I don't have a pointer, but the larger issue is that there are more than 20 million tons of grain there, much of which goes to the continent of Africa, right? So if we don't necessarily think about, well, those are just white folks in Ukraine, think about the people on the continent of Africa that depends on that grain. And so the longer, and another thing about these missile strikes is that some of these strikes hit farms where there are tons of feed for animals that produce, that contribute to the agricultural infrastructure that feeds the world. So Ukraine is not just about Ukraine. Ukraine feeds the world. And if we don't care about how Ukraine feeds the world or care about our people, then it really goes to a question of how much, how engaged are we in the society? And so we are pulled into this whether we want to or not, but the gas prices are the main thing. And another important point is that this war is going to keep on happening because Putin has enough people as cannon fodder to send into Ukraine because he doesn't have a civil society that's really going to push him and make him care. And so he can send tens of thousands of troops to die. And so this can go on this year, it can go on next year. And so what we need to be on the front lines of understanding how it impacts us because ultimately, as I said before, Putin is going to continue the war with us, and the more aid that we send to Ukraine, that keeps your daughters, your sisters, your family members at home. That's the bottom line, whether we want to accept that or not.
And here is a perfect example. This is a Google Maps here that gives you an indication of, again, the countries around Ukraine. So you're talking about, you got Poland, you look at Hungary, Romania, you look at all those different countries. Yeah. And so, again, for the person who's sitting at home right now, they're saying, somebody who's black who's saying, man, look, this don't mean nothing. Well, look, no, go back to the map, please. Go back to the map. Thank you. Look, you got Paris, you got France, you look at Ireland, you look at the UK, you look at all of that. At the end of the day, what you're looking at is the impact on all of Europe. Well, what's happening in Europe has a direct impact on us. What happens in Europe has an impact on goods and services being made in China, Vietnam. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Yeah. The world is now linked. Something happens in one piece, it's a domino.
Yeah, and to add on to your point,
no one's isolated.
No one is isolated. And another thing to add on to that is that when I was in the country and helping to transport people, we have to be aware that we have to be really aware that some of this aid, we need to have a voice in where this aid is going. So I was here, and again, I really thank you for bringing me on to the show because I was here talking to the NSC, the National Security Council, and I can't get into the details of what we talked about, but one of the main issues, one of the things I can say, there's a conversation about messaging about why this should matter to Americans. And so one of the main things is that because this is your tax dollars, we have a right to say, hey, what about our people who are being impacted by this? Is that money going to our communities? Because I can tell you that in many respects, it is not, because we're not plugged into these infrastructures where the money is going to be going to name any NGO that you can think of, large, predominantly white, who don't care about our issues.
Non-governmental organizations.
Thank you, non-governmental organizations. And so the money's already been approved. Biden's going to sign. Do you want to have a say in where this money is going? Because we do. And one of the meetings I was in today dealt exactly with those topics. So we need more people engaged, engaging your senator, engaging your councilwoman, the Congressional Black Caucus, to ensure that also the number of Ukrainians that are coming here should include Black Ukrainians, should include nationals who are Black, because there are a lot of them who are. And so we have a voice in this subject because our people are involved in this, whether we think they are or not.
Questions from our panelists. Dr. Carter, you're a political science professor at Howard University. I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I was going to thank Terrell for his reporting, especially while he was there on Twitter. I followed. And I was wondering, in this same vein that you were just speaking of, is this a moment perhaps to advocate for Black immigrants from other parts of the world? So in particular, thinking about Haiti, who imports a lot of its grain from the Ukraine and is now facing a food shortage, inflation, and other things that make the island less than hospitable for many of its citizens, and who've sought refuge either in South America and trying to get to America in many cases, but have been refused. And the United States keeps saying over and over, there's no space, but has already pledged at least 100,000 spots for Ukrainian refugees. So do you think this is a moment to perhaps push the U.S. government on its policy toward other refugees from other parts of the world?
Absolutely, because the main thing is that it's a hypocrisy. And so one of the main issues that we have to think about as a community is that you know, the thing about Haiti is that when you think about the financial systems, they were already hampered down long before this war started. So this war just exacerbates what's happening. And so one of the best things that we could do is continue to encourage, again, like so much power in how these decisions are made depends on how engaged you are with your senators, engaged with your city council people. So it's a very essential thing. So I would agree, absolutely, yes, but not just Haiti. I would encourage people who come from the continent of Africa, right? Because there are a lot of immigrants who are coming from coming from the continent who are not having the opportunities to be involved in these slots. But the main thing is that, and I can tell you just from being on the ground and closing out to your question, is that when I was taking out Ukrainians and going across the border, I think that so many of these correspondents, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, you saw all these white faces because I think the world sympathized with people who look like them, right? And so and one thing I would say is that they have plenty of people who are advocating for them, and we have to be equally as aggressive. In advocating for our people so they can get the same airtime and being involved, bringing them on Roland Martin, bringing them on other Black shows, including independent journalists such as myself.
Scott?
Yeah, Terrell, thanks for your report. I've heard a lot about Black Ukrainians, and I don't know the history of that country. But could you share a little bit about how the immigration of Black folks to Ukraine, or give us some sense of how many Black Ukrainians there are? And then secondly, if I may, how do you think this war is going to end?
Thank you very much for that question. In regards to immigration to, it's not just Ukraine, but it also includes other parts of the Russian Empire. So, and I'll give you an abridged version of this, so I don't want to bore people, but in simplest terms, we can document Black people going to the Russian Empire dating back to Catherine the Great. They came through the Ottoman Empire and made their way and made it, basically it's now Turkey, okay? And so, and they made their way into Russia. And then from Russia, they were sent to, they immigrated to places like what's now modern Ukraine, Belarus, etc. We saw the largest number of Black people, namely from the continent, going to the Soviet Union during the decolonization of Africa during the late 1950s, going into the early 1960s. As far as numbers, we don't exactly know because Russia did not keep a lot of data on that, still doesn't. Same thing for Ukraine. And so they started off in Russia, went down to Ukraine. There are large populations of Black Ukrainian people, so many of them are my friends. Do I have the census data? They don't keep that data, so we don't really know. How is this war going to end? It's going to be long, because the bottom line is that Putin does not have to answer or respond to public criticism, because if they do criticize him, they end up in jail, or if you're a diligent journalist, you end up being killed, falling off of a cliff, falling off of a 7-story floor, for example. And so, because of that, they have more Russian troops to send. And here's another irony of this: many of the people who are being killed are ethnic minorities that come from the southern regions of Russia. And so if you look at their names, and many of them have these kind of these Asiatic features that look like they're actually from Asia, they're actually indigenous Russians. And so Russia has a history of genocide that's very similar to that of the United States. And many of these people come from southern regions, including Siberia. Siberia, by the way, is not indigenous Russian land. And if Russia was truly indigenous to its original geography, Siberia would not be a part of that. And so you're sending all these young, 20-somethings, 18-year-old Russians from the southern region who are ethnic minorities to be killed. And the whole thing is why we don't care about them. And Putin is a racist anyway. I mean, he literally talks about Ukrainians like white trash. So we send our trash over to kill their trash. That's generally the way that you break it down. That's the simplest terms for Americans here to understand. So there's a very similar history of Black people, being highly represented in our armed services as well. But this is going to be a long-term war, simply because Putin has the numbers, even though Ukrainians are very diligent. But because Putin doesn't have to answer to public criticism, he can keep this going on for as long as he wants. And so that's going to be a very long haul for us.
And for people to understand, when you say long war, you think about, look, the war in Liberia lasted 15 years. So I think part of the problem in this country, frankly, we looked at the Iraq War and was like, oh, that lasted so that long. No. There have been wars that have been going on around this country that have lasted 10, 15, 20 years that we had no idea about, because frankly, too many Americans don't give a damn about foreign policy. Monique, question.
And it's actually on that point. I do want to mention, though, I did love how Terrell just said that Russia has genocidal history quite similar to that of the United States. People will figure that one out later. But Terrell, what I like about what you do is that it's so kind of anti what people think of as typical, and we just don't see enough of our folks in these spaces being experts in international affairs and international relations the way that you are. What can you tell students, college students who may be watching, or younger than that, or adults who have always had an interest in it, that can help them get further on that path?
Thank you for your question, Monique. So I would encourage people to get into the policy aspects of this, because that's where the decisions are being made. And so we see a lot of our people who are represented in communications and the politics areas of it. And listen, that's all important. We see this even in domestic politics, but where the policies are where the real decisions are being made is in policy, deciding on how do we view the world. We look at, to me, to really break it down for students, international affairs is very much like urban planning. You literally are deciding how the world is going to be shaped. It's really all it is. It's not that complex. And so what we need are people who are interested in doing the nitty-gritty, learn a language. I mean, I'm taking Russian, taking Ukrainian, I'm taking advanced classes right now. I'll encourage people to do that. And ultimately, one of the main problems, which gets to the genesis of your question, Monique, is that you have too many white males who are making these decisions who don't understand oppression, who don't understand what it means to be occupied, who don't wake up every morning with this idea of, am I going to be able to survive the next day? Quite frankly, so many of these people coming from the Upper West Side of New York or from Georgetown and don't have any lived life experiences to draw comparative analyses between this, because Monique, as I said before, Russia and America have very similar genocidal histories. Trust me, when I say that in Washington, a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it doesn't help us to identify the problem if we don't acknowledge our own complicity and how similar they are and how Russia throws it in our face, right? Yeah. And so in order for us to really get into those rooms, we got to get into the policy areas, and most importantly, we have to be able to lean into our experiences, because it's those experiences that are going to help us identify the problems. And I think that's what's missing in Washington international policy, which is why I have my own podcast, Black Diplomats, that deals with the policy of these issues and bringing in our people, just like Roland Martin here is doing with politics, news, et cetera, so that we could be participants in this conversation, because we have a right to plan the world, just as Roland Martin talks about every day about what it means to plan our society, our countries, our cities, and our counties and our states.
I do want to ask you about what's happened with Brittany Griner. She's still being held there.
Yeah.
Her spouse did an interview with Angela Rye where she talked about this, and one of the things that she said is that if this was a LeBron James or Steph Curry or a major NBA player, she said there'll be a lot more focus and attention on what has happened. I want to play some of this and then get your thoughts on, again, the situation with Brittany Griner there in Russia. Go ahead.
Don't truly know. I'm in a position of complete vulnerability right now. I have to trust people that I didn't even know until February the 17th. So I'm trusting, her lawyers to, tell me when they go see her, how is she? It's the first question I ask, how is she? How does she look? How is her spirit? How is her energy? But the truth of the matter is, because I haven't heard her voice myself, I don't 100% know. But I am being told that, she's doing okay.
So a week after Brittany was detained, Russia invades Ukraine.
That almost killed me, actually. I was terrified what that meant. Am I ever gonna see her again? Initially, that was the first thing that probably popped in my mind when that happened. I thought that was it. I'm like, I'm really never gonna see her again.
Is she being used as a political pawn?
Yes, yes.
If it was LeBron or KD or Steph Curry, do you think that you would be sitting here today?
Respectfully, and no shade to them when I say this, but the answer to that question would be no, I don't. And I just think, it's because we do live in a world that, the bigger the platform, the bigger the urgency. And, because of the difference in that WNBA platform and that NBA platform, it's going to be a difference in urgency.
The players who...
So Terrell, look, they've been extending it. Do you believe that she's being used by Vladimir Putin as a pawn in this, and that we may see this go through the summer to the fall, where she's still being detained in Russia?
Well, very much so. The answer to your question emphatically is yes. By the way, I have a colleague of mine, Kimberly St. Julian Barnon, who is a part of a group of people who are actually helping to get her release and magnify what's going on here, and I'm pretty sure you know her. But the answer to your question is yes. And when I first heard about this, my fundamental question is, what is anyone affiliated with the NBA doing and playing in Russia? In my view, it's a national security threat. I myself.
But what can be done? Because what she's saying, hey, we want to see Biden do more, but obviously
it's not a lot that they can do, because it would be one thing if we're in a country that respected American diplomacy to some extent. Russia don't give a damn. That's the problem. Right. And so I understand why people want to rah, and this, that, and the third. You have to tread lightly in that regard. And it's a slippery slope, in ways. And again, I do respect the fact that she's saying, well, yes, if this was LeBron James or anyone else, she has every right to feel that way. Right. And she's right about that in the sense that because of their names. Yeah, Brittany Griner, keep in mind, she's also popular in Russia. Right. And a lot of people respect her there. And so she went primarily because she got a significantly larger salary than she would get in the NBA. But again, what I'm saying to you, Roland, is that from a national security standpoint, by any authority in the NBA, no player would play in Russia precisely because of what's happening now. I don't know if I'm thinking about this. Well, it goes back to more of us making these decisions and being in foreign policy. There would be no way in hell, if I was the commissioner, that any player would be in Russia. Listen, Roland, I am not a
or even before they even invaded.
Even before they invaded.
I mean, you would have been anticipating, hey, warning folks in advance.
Somebody, listen, and I would I just feel like in my gut, someone dropped the ball.
But you got to understand, there are a significant number of female professional basketball players who play all across the world because they actually make far more money playing overseas than they do here in the United States.
Russia is a different story.
So,
yes, absolutely.
So whether we're talking about Russia, whether we're talking about Poland, I mean, there are multiple countries, and so these are independent contractors. These are people who are traveling and again
incentivized.
And some are being literally paid. I'm talking about $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. Their international salaries dwarf what they're making here.
Okay, so the bottom line, again, if I were a policymaker in the NBA, if I'm thinking about a decision, would it have been better for us to pay these people more money than to deal with this problem?
Well, first of all, of course.
That's what I'm saying.
But what you also then go back to is television ratings, who watches, who funds the league, all of that. The issue, but the thing still here is there anything that the United States? I mean, yes, the United States State Department is involved, but the fact of the matter is, ain't like, as you said, ain't like Putin trying to have a conversation with the United States.
It's not. So the reality is that no, there's not. No.
So could there be? And this is an example where, and I've said this for years, and I really hope black people understand what I'm about to say. I hope black people really understand this. If you want to understand the value of a Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., it's in this situation right here. There's no doubt in my mind that a Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. of 20 years ago would have already been on a plane to Russia to try to get Brittany Griner out. And because his stature across the world, how he's brought numerous people back, so this is for all the people who want to take the title of being the top civil rights leader. No. This is an example right here of what happens when you are not just an American civil rights leader, but you respected across the world. Yeah. And I think part of the issue here is that you don't have that. And so, is there a contingent? Is there a group of Americans who have relationships with Russia who could sort of intercede, where it's not the government?
Right, because that's not going to happen.
Right.
That's not going to work. No. So
a humanitarian mission.
That is possible, but so it depends on a number of things. There could be a negotiation where there's like a swap, because
Well, the problem is who you swapping. And then
it's a crap,
and now it's government, because who are you holding? So this is, it's not like you going spy for spy because she ain't a spy.
She's not a spy, but that doesn't mean that you can't. That doesn't mean it's about her being an asset. That's ultimately. So it's not about NBA player versus spy. It's about asset versus asset. And again, an asset for what? An asset in Putin's case, this is just a pawn essentially.
Right.
And so that's the most unfortunate thing about this. She is a pawn in a larger political.
Trapped.
She's trapped. But again, Roland, the fundamental problem, and I'm going to go back to this, is that she should not have been there in the first place. And we need to the NBA, WNBA needs to reevaluate it needs to evaluate its security apparatus around the globe. And finally, I'll say that, yes, there's a large disparity between WNBA and NBA, but the larger question is, when it comes down to security, sometimes it's worth it to put that money just from a security standpoint,
Look, one thing I know about America, we ain't spending money until after the fact. Terrell Starr, we appreciate it. You mentioned your podcast. Where can people listen to it?
Yeah, so Black Diplomats Podcast is available on all of your podcasting platforms. So you go to Spotify, you go to iTunes, wherever you can download a podcast. Black Diplomats is there. We're resuming next week with an episode that deals directly with the Russia attitudes towards the war. And we'll be also relaunching a newsletter, Ukrainian Sunflower, in the first week of July.
All right, then. Well, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And glad you're back safe.
Thank you.
Folks, don't forget, you want to support us. Download the Black Star Network app. All available platforms, Apple TV, Android TV, of course, Apple phone, Android phone, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Xbox One, Samsung Smart TV. And also, if you want to join our Bring the Funk fan club, you can do so by sending your check and money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. Cash App with $ RM Unfiltered. Unfiltered. PayPal is R-Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And YouTube, y'all hit the like button. Okay, there's no reason we're not at 1,000. All right, come on now. We got 78 left. That's it. Just hit the doggone like button. Almost 2,000 of y'all watching right now. You're on Facebook as well. Well, first of all, we don't have that many on Facebook because Facebook, y'all, but tell you the game that they're playing. We got a 1.3 million followers on our Facebook page, which is larger than all of the platforms. They are deliberately suppressing our views on Facebook, okay? We used to have 2 or 3 or 4, sometimes 10,000 people watching our videos live on Facebook. But what Facebook does is they suppress your numbers, and then they want you to pay to boost the folk who already follow you. In fact, many of you who are on Facebook, you don't even get your live notifications anymore when we go live, even though you have opted into that. Now, I told y'all 3 years ago, I got an email saying there was a glitch in their system. I got an email in September from our Facebook person. There was a glitch in their system. I'm still waiting for them to get back to me about the glitch in their system. So that's why if I pull it up right now, let me just see how many people. And just so y'all know, because I know some of y'all might be saying, "Oh, you know, I'm not believing you." Again, we have 800. Let me check. Let's see. We have. Let's see here. Last check, 859,443 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We have 1.3 million people who follow us on my Facebook channel, and what you're seeing here right now. Let me just see here, just so y'all know. You know, Sheryl Sandberg, of course, announced today she's stepping down as the COO. So if y'all think I'm lying, look right here. Go ahead. Right now, there are 167 people watching our live stream right now on Facebook. 167. 167. Y'all, think about that. 1.3 million, 167. They are deliberately suppressing our numbers. That's why I need y'all, and I can't stress enough why I need you to download the app. Here's why. If we have, and listen to me clearly, if we have 1.3 million people who have downloaded our app, we don't have to be on Facebook. We don't have to be on these platforms. So creating our own app is creating our own app for our OTT network allows us, we don't have to stream on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or Twitch or any of these platforms. We can actually stream to our followers. We have the data, and then we can sell the advertising ourselves, and we're not having to deal with their rules of what we can say or do. So that's why it's important. Last check, I think my man Keenan hit me that we're around 40,000 downloads. We want to hit 100,000 downloads of the Black Star Network app by the end of this year. We should be even at 200,000, 300,000. But if y'all need to understand how we are so good at building other people's platforms, but then we're not the same when it comes to our own. This is a perfect example. And so, yeah, the folks at Facebook, no doubt, are suppressing our numbers. There's no way in the world you can tell me 1.3 million people follow us and 167 are watching our live stream right now. Sorry, y'all, the numbers just don't add up. I'll be right back with our Tech Talk segment.
You know, he brought his own sound. So when you have an artist that creates his own sound, like Earth, Wind & Fire, Stevie, you know, they come in, the Beatles, they create their own sound. He kept reinventing himself. He wasn't afraid to change instrumentations or not use drums or not use bass or use the Lynn machine or use real drums or use, you know, pots and pans. It didn't matter. It's just like he wasn't afraid to, the sound was different every time he did an album, completely different, you know? And the things that he wrote about, it was things that he felt he needed to speak about. So a lot of honesty, you know, whether he would admit to it or not, there was a lot of honesty and a lot of things that were real to him. When he gave, he gave. You know, I think for me, he is my favorite, my number one favorite guitar player in the world. He was. He played with, and especially I loved times me playing drums with him, he and I playing together. When I played drums, it was a whole nother thing. And I just think that he reached people in a way as an artist that he reached you because he was, again, honest in a way that he said it a million times, but he wasn't trying to write the next Purple Rain. That was already what it was.
Right.
I can write that. That was that one time thing,
right.
But it's never going to happen again. So why would I write that again? Then it's not special anymore.
Next on A Balanced Life, we're talking everything from prayer to exercise to positive affirmations and everything that's needed to keep you strong and along your way. That's on a next A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie, on Black Star Network.
I'm Dr. Greg Carr, and coming up on the next Black Table, thinking about the Black freedom movement in a global way. Dr. John Monroe joins us to discuss his book, The Anti-Colonial Front, which maps the social justice movement in the United States and its impact internationally, from Asia to Africa, and how movements like anti-communism were used to slow down racial equality, like critical race theory today.
Critical race theory today, communism back then, that's essentially mobilized to shut down any challenges to a given system of power.
Connecting the civil rights movement to colonialism on the next Black Table, exclusively here on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach and host of Get Wealthy. On the next Get Wealthy, here's the good news. Black women are the fastest growing segment of business owners. The not so good news, the average business by Black women is only earning revenues of $45,000 or less. On the next Get Wealthy, you're gonna hear from a woman who went from her kitchen table to cap tables, growing her business to over $1 million.
You should start a business because your product is needed in the world, not because you hate the person that you work with. If you hate your job and you hate your manager, go find a new job, a place that makes you feel comfortable. And I say that because starting a business is truly a labor of love and service.
If you want to learn how to do it, right here on the next Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
Hey everybody, it's your girl Lunel.
So what's up? This is your boy Earthquake.
Hi, I'm Chaylee Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Are you one of those folks who has difficulty keeping up with your monthly budget? If so, a new app will empower you to take control of your finances and build your wealth. That's right, folks. Here is the app. Let's show it. Altro is a free app for Apple products. It uses financial content to educate folks trying to elevate their financial status and help users build credit with recurring payments. Michael Broughton, founder of Altro, joins us from San Francisco. Glad to have you here. So first off, is it only for Apple? Is it also going to be an app later for Android?
Yeah, the app is currently Apple-based. We are working on an Android version this year, actually.
And so, in terms of, look, there are other apps out there when it comes to plugging in with your monthly budget. So how does this actually work?
Yeah, it's quite simple. What we're doing is we are taking recurrencies, things that people are already paying for, and turning them into trade lines, things that actually help you build your credit. The magic is in what we do with our app. In about 30 seconds, you sign up. We find what subscriptions you're already paying for, your Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, Pandora bills, and we tie these to your credit score. So in about 30 days, you'll see it actually show up on your Credit Karma or Credit Sesame account, or even in our app, showing how it's affecting and increasing your score over time.
So, where did the idea originate from?
It started with me, actually. I struggled a lot with building credit when I was coming into college. I didn't realize tuition was a real thing, and I was $10,000 short on my tuition. No one wanted to give me the money. No one wanted to give me a chance, and I ended up in a situation where I almost did not start university because of it. Realized that credit was key. It was the access point to getting from 0 to 1 to starting my personal journey. And I wanted to enable that access for everyone else. So that's how the app was born.
Cool. And how has it gone thus far in terms of users and things along those lines?
Yeah, it's been great. Last year, we actually went viral. We were number 7 on the App Store for a number of time. It led to hundreds of thousands of people downloading our app, something we weren't ready for as 6 people in a hacker house trying to figure this out. Since then, a year later, we are at 40 people who are thinking about Ultra every day. The user base is consistently growing, and we've rebranded. We came up with the name Ultra, which really means other in French, all about inclusivity and building a brand and culture around this new wave of credit that we're building for our users.
All right, questions from the panel. Monique, you're first. You're on mute.
Then I wasn't ready. I thought I was ready.
Nope, you were not ready.
What advice really, or do you have any tips? I mean, I know you're trying to pull people out of things, but for the college student, for those of us who have teens will be in college years soon, like to avoid the things that land them needing you.
Yeah, the magic number is 3. You want to have 3 active trade lines on your credit report at all times. And the length and history of these trade lines, how long they stay open, also is a big determinant in what your score will be. When getting your first apartment, when buying books, when getting into universities, or even getting your first job, your credit score becomes a factor that lenders and decision makers are making when saying yes or no in those critical moments. So having a credit score, first of all, is very important. Having 3 trade lines behind that is even more key.
Yeah, what are trade lines?
Yes, trade lines are active data that is sitting on your credit report. This can be an auto loan, a home loan. We take subscription data and turn that into a trade line. It could be your first credit card, a secure card. Anything that impacts your credit data and thickens your file is considered a trade line.
Okay, thank you.
Nyambi?
Yeah, so how do you get people to buy into the idea that credit isn't scary? I think so many of us have been traumatized from our own lack of credit worthiness, or just coming from families who either had no credit or poor credit, that we view credit as evil and scary. How do you make, or at least make people feel like credit can be something that they can approach and something they can manage and handle?
That's a great question. And credit is supposed to be empowering, right? And especially our people, we've seen it as something that is evil, something that does pull you back. Credit debt, credit fraud, a lot of that is real things that can destroy someone's life just as much as it can help someone's life, which has made credit scary. I think that education is the biggest piece of it, though. Going into something with the understanding of how it works makes life so much easier and makes credit empowering for individuals. We actually focus on this. We built 400 1-minute-long audio clips that talk about anything from credit to 401ks to option trading, calls and spreads, cover calls, cover puts, everything you can imagine in our app for free. And we believe that accessibility to education is accessibility to better scores, which is accessibility to new financial products and opportunity. Literally increasing the GDP and net worth of our individuals by empowering them with education on the forefront.
Cool, thank you.
All right, then. Well, next thing is, how are you looking to grow or build the app?
Yeah, we just announced that we raised $18 million to actually help more people build credit, which was not only exciting news, but allows us to expand our team, our mission, our journey, and help millions of Americans build their credit score. Our app is completely free as well. So anyone with an iPhone and soon to be an Android device too can download our app and start building credit with their Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, whatever bills that they already have.
So is Jay-Z one of the folks who is supporting you?
Yes. So Jay-Z with Jay Brown and Larry Marcus, they're the founders of Marcy Venture Partners. We're our first investors actually in the company. So they found us, gave us our first check, and it grew from there. We were known as like the Marcy Venture Jay-Z company, and brought on many more, talent, celebrities, and great funds and investors like Sean Mendy from Concrete Rose and Y Combinator, who have all came in as investors to help us out.
All right, then. Well, look, we certainly are glad to see it. That's one of the reasons why we created this segment, to give people an understanding of Black people who are in the technology space and what they're doing. And so congratulations with that. Keep growing.
No, thank you. Thank you. You can find us at ultra.io. Find us in the App Store. And if you need to reach out to me, Michael at getperch.app is our old name. I'm happy to talk and answer any questions.
All right, Michael, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, just a couple of more stories for us to do before we go. The city of New York, they have decided to pay a man $7 million, who spent 23 years, listen to me again, 23 years in jail for a crime that he did not commit. Grant Williams was wrongfully convicted for a 1996 murder. Several witnesses said he was not the gunman, and there was no forensic evidence at the scene connected to Williams. He was exonerated in July. His lawyer said Williams plans to help others who were wrongfully convicted. In Kentucky, 3 federal corrections officers have been indicted for assaulting an inmate and covering it up. On Friday, the Department of Justice announced that Big Sandy officers Samuel Patrick and Clinton Pauley have been charged with assault, and Lieutenant Kevin Pierce is charged with helping them cover it up. If convicted, the officers could face up to 20 years in prison. Also, a Black militia leader has been found guilty as well. A jury found John F. Johnson, who also known as Grandmaster Jay, we had him on Roland Martin Unfiltered before, guilty of charges of assaulting, resisting, or impeding law enforcement and brandishing a firearm during racial justice protests a couple of years ago. Johnson is a leader of the NFAC, or Not Effing Around Coalition. Officials say Grandmaster Jay pointed an AR-15 platform rifle and tactical flashlight at 2 federally deputized officers on a roof in downtown Louisville. Johnson's sentence is set for August 22nd. He faces a penalty of not less than 7 years in prison without the possibility of parole. So, man, that is a story that we are following as well. And real quick here, folks, speaking of Louisville, let me go ahead and read this real quick. A former Louisville, Kentucky Department of Corrections officer has been charged by the Department of Justice with excessive force. Darrell Taylor, 32 years ago, was indicted today by a grand jury in Louisville for using unlawful force against a pretrial detainee while Taylor worked for the Louisville Metro Department of Corrections. That announcement was made by Assistant Attorney General Christian Clark of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. He was charged with 1 count of deprivation of rights under the color of law if the charges carry a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. All right, folks. And again, I keep telling y'all, DOJ Civil Rights Division doing some great work. I don't know why in the hell the Biden White House is not talking about that a hell of a lot more. It's confusing to me. Don't understand it. All right, Niambi, certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot for joining us. Monique, thanks for joining us as well. Scott had to leave a little bit early, and so we thank all 3 of you for being with us on today's show. Folks, again, please do us a favor, download the Black Star Network app. I can't explain to you any better than I did a little bit earlier what happens when we are dependent upon other platforms to promote us. Isaac Hayes III talks about this all the time, where you might think that you have 1 million followers on Instagram. They're not letting you communicate with all of your followers because they actually want to make all the money. And so you're only reaching 3 or 4% of your followers. That's actually how that works. And so, folks, that's what these platforms do. But when we have the ability to to control our own destiny, then we can do so. And so please, we want all of you, whether you have your phone, your pads, whether you have Apple TV or Roku device, whatever, download the app. The Black Star Network app, curated by yours truly, Roland S. Martin. The Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, the Xbox One, Samsung Smart TV. And please support us in what we do. Coming up, of course, we've got the Poor People's Campaign. It's going to be on June 18th. We're going to be broadcasting from there. And so we are looking forward to that. So we want you, please, to assist us all you can. And so you can join our Bring the Funk fan club by our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans to contribute at least $50 each. That's $4.19 a month, 13 cents a day. And so please, you can do so by sending your check-out money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Shout out to Ebony Long, to Dwayne Jones, to Alexander Fullmore, to, let's see here, Gregory Brewster, for all, let's see, Deborah Joshua, Kenneth, let's see here, Casey Robinson, Monique Pierre, Rorna Williams, J.B. Bond, all of them contributed during today's show. That's it, folks. I'll see you tomorrow right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Holla!